My name is Artem, and I'm 22 years old. I come from a family of 10, 9 boys and 1 girl. I was the 4th oldest. We're a family who went to church every Sunday. I remember growing up and going to Sunday school. We used to learn about Jesus and the things that he used to do. How he used to help the needy, how he used to attend to the poor. I remember just asking myself, why am I not seeing these things in the church? I decided to try to ask my mom about it. So I asked her, Mom, why don't people help the homeless? And she told me, people don't help the homeless because you need a calling to help the homeless. This was something that I didn't agree with, so it kind of actually pushed me away from the church because I saw the church as a bunch of hypocrites. I remember when I was about 13 years old, I went to a church service where there were a bunch of ex-drug addicts who were telling us their testimonies. I remember when I was listening to them, I was just listening to the things that they went through in life. They told us of how they lived, a bad lifestyle, how they cheated people, how they lied to people, how they just did a bunch of wrong things. And I asked myself when I was listening to them, how could a person get so low in their life? After hearing these testimonies, I vowed to never become like these people. I started hanging out with the wrong people, drinking, partying, and eventually I started using drugs. Now, the more I was living in this lifestyle, the more things I started losing. I started to lose a lot of friends, the trust I had between me and my family. I started to lose all my possessions. I sold them all at the pawn shop. I started to lose a lot of jobs because I couldn't work on withdrawals. And eventually I ended up where I was collecting scrap metal and returning it at the scrapyard every day for my cash. I became the person that I vowed I'd never be. Eventually I came to a point where I almost lost my life. I remember that day, I stole my brother's rims and I sold them for some cash. After I got the cash and I got the stuff, I went straight to the house and I went right to the bathroom and prepared everything. And everything was going normal, everything was going fine. I did all my stuff and everything went by just the same as it always does. I cleaned everything up and everything was normal, everything was fine. And as soon as I went to the door handle, everything just went black. The next thing I remember was this feeling going from the top of my head, down my back, and down to my feet. The only way I could describe this feeling was just something was being torn apart or something was just being cut in half. Next thing I remember was I was standing in a room. I looked to the left and I saw the desk. It was the desk from my brother's room. I looked to the right and I saw the door to the attic. I remember looking around and I looked up, looked forward, and I looked on the bed, my brother's bed. And I realized I was in a completely different room already. When I looked down at the bed, I saw my body was laying there. All of a sudden, I felt that feeling once again. This time it was going from the bottom of my feet to the very top of my head. And I found myself in the same exact position that I saw myself from outside my body. When I came to myself, I realized that I wasn't supposed to live at that moment. I realized that it's only because of the prayers of my mother that I was still alive. It's only because of the prayers of my grandmother that I was still alive. I knew that it was by the grace of God that I still lived, that it was God's mercy that I was still alive. It was that day that I made the decision that I need to find some help. It was that day that I realized that I was hopeless in my problem. I decided to look for a rehab center, and within a few days I was already admitted. Now, the whole admission process at the recovery center usually takes a few months, but for me it took 2 days. And when I got to the center, it was a completely different atmosphere than what I was used to. When I got there, I saw just people who were serving those who were in need. I saw brothers who loved each other, who were just encouraging each other. And the biggest thing was they all came from the same background that I did. Now, this is something that really got me interested, and I was curious on what was going on there and what they were talking about. After about 2 weeks on the program, we went to a church service. It was actually a prayer service, and I remember the preacher. He was preaching about Jesus, preaching about how he was the Son of God, how he came to this world, how he was blameless, sinless, spotless, and how he came to this world and he died for my sins. When I heard these words, even though they were words that I might have heard thousands of times in thousands of sermons, this time they touched me. And I came out there and I repented. Now I might have not experienced some great experience while I was out there, but the next morning when I woke up, all those desires I had for drugs, all those desires I had for that past life and that old life, that old lifestyle, they just fell away from me completely. And I was a completely new person. I was freed by the blood of the Lamb. I realized that I have to start putting in my whole heart to seeking who God is and why he saved me. And once I started to do this, those things that I once lost in my life, they started to return to me. Like my friends, now I got a whole bunch of friends that I can actually trust. The relationships with my family, they've been just getting better and better every single day. I might not have a lot of possessions, but the things that I do have, I really value. And the best thing that I have, that I gained in life, is that I have a friend in Jesus. Being at the center was great and all, but I knew that my time was coming already, and that soon I would have to leave that place. So I started to ask God, what do you want from me? Where do I go from here? What do I do next? So a little while later, I got a chance to go to a street ministry with some people, minister to those who are homeless and living on the streets. I remember while I was out there, I saw this one guy who was just sitting there, and there was a look on his face. He wasn't a homeless person, he wasn't a bum, he wasn't a drug user. You could tell he was a businessman by what he wore. He wore a suit, a tie. I came up to him because I felt like something was drawing me to him. As I started talking to him a little bit, he started to just tell me what's going on in his life. He was telling me how he was going through a divorce, how things were going bad with his children, and just nothing was going right in his life, and how he was thinking about suicide. And now, after a while of talking with him, I decided that we needed to pray for him. So I called the rest of the people over, and we all gathered around this man, and we started praying for him. Now, before we started praying for him, he just had this really heavy look in his eyes. He just had this darkness on his face, and he had this big frown, and you could tell that he wasn't a happy person. But as soon as he lifted his face after the prayer, his whole face was just shining, and his eyes, they were just so bright, and he had tears rolling down his face, and he just looked like the happiest person in the world. When I saw that, I understood that God spoke a word to me. He said, the saved are called to save. So I decided I need to stay at the recovery center and continue on just helping out there, volunteering there, giving my life to those people who are in need, to those people who went through problems like I did. I have a word for those who are going through hard times right now, to those who feel like life is just hopeless. I want you guys to know that there's hope in Jesus Christ, that He's the only one that could give you the happiness that you need, the peace that you need in life. And I also have a word for those who didn't go through what I went through. You guys have something that I lost a long time ago. You guys still have the time. You guys still have the trust with people. You guys still have all the resources, the money that I lost a long time ago. I want you guys to know, don't throw that all away. Invest your youth into God. Invest your youth into something that is eternal, that has meaning to it. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through Him.